The Assembly will come back to order. We are going to go to Order of Business 7, Messages from the Senate.
Senate Chamber, Carson City, May 31st, 2023. To the Honorable the Assembly, I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate amended and on this day passed as amended Assembly Bill 285, Amendment 701, 821, Assembly Bill 330, Amendment 851, and respectfully request your Honorable Body to concur in said amendments. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed as amended Senate Bills 58, 467, 475, 480, 495, 498. Chair Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary of the Senate.
Next, we're going to go to Order of Business 13, Unfinished Business of the Preceding Day for the purpose of concur, not concur. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're already in Order of Business 13 for the purpose of considering Assembly Bill 285.
We will consider Assembly Bill 285.
Assembly Bill 285, introduced by Assemblywoman Taylor et al. An act relating to education, removing certain requirements for the use of restorative disciplinary practices in public schools, requiring certain schools to provide a progressive discipline plan based on restorative justice to certain pupils, revising provisions governing the development of a plan of discipline by the Board of Trustees of a school district or governing body of a charter school or university school for profoundly gifted pupils, revising provisions governing age and certain other requirements for the suspension, expulsion, and permanent expulsion of pupils, requiring the provision and reporting of a plan to provide education services to certain pupils, revising provisions governing the reporting of certain data concerning discipline of pupils, and providing other matters properly thereto. There are two amendments for this bill. The first is Amendment 701, proposed by the Senate Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 701 to Assembly Bill 285.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 701 to Assembly Bill 285. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of concurring in Senate Amendment number 701 to Assembly Bill 285 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I have Amendment 821, proposed by Senator Lang.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 821 to Assembly Bill 285.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 821 to Assembly Bill 285. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in Senate Amendment number 821 to Assembly Bill 285 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill 330?
We will consider Assembly Bill 330.
Assembly Bill 330, introduced by the Committee on Education, an act relating to education requiring a suspension or expulsion in a charter school or a university school for profoundly gifted pupils to be consistent with such punishments in certain public schools, requiring a plan for restorative discipline in public schools to include consideration of certain data relating to pupil discipline, authorizing the superintendent of public instruction to require implementation of an alternative plan for restorative discipline if a public school fails to take certain actions relating to disproportionality in pupil discipline, requiring a plan for restorative discipline to reflect the authority to temporarily remove a pupil from the classroom, requiring certain actions by a school at the time of a suspension or expulsion of a pupil for committing certain acts, revising the persons to whom the appeals of certain disciplinary determinations may be made, revising requirements for policies for the appeal of suspensions and expulsions, and providing other matters properly thereto. I have Amendment 851, proposed by Senator Cannizzaro.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 851 to Assembly Bill 330.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 851 to Assembly Bill 330. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Howdegui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1 minute recess.
We will be in a 1-minute recess.
Ways and Means members behind the bar.
The Assembly will come back to order under Order Business 13, unfinished business of the preceding day. There being no objection, the Speaker and Chief Clerk will sign Assembly Bill 285 and Assembly Bill 330. We will go to Order Business 4, reports of standing committees.
Mr. Speaker, Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which were referred Senate Bills 145, 195, 275, 290, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation do pass. Elaine Marzullo, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Government Affairs, to which was referred Senate Bill 305, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation then do pass as amended. Selena Torres, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Health and Human Services, to which were referred Senate Bills 232, 237, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation do pass. And your Committee on Health and Human Services, to which was referred Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 5, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation be adopted. Sarah Peters, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Judiciary, to which were referred Senate Bills 222, 307, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation do pass. Brittany Miller, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Ways and Means, to which was referred Assembly Bill 515, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation do pass. And your Committee on Ways and Means, to which were referred Assembly Bills 128, 319, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation then do pass amended. And your Committee on Ways and Means, to which were referred Assembly Bills 482, 506, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation then do pass amended. And your Committee on Ways and Means, to which were re-referred Assembly Bills 137, 252, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation then do pass amended. And your Committee on Ways and Means, to which were re-referred Assembly Bills 258, 261, 263, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation then do pass amended. Danielle Monroe Moreno, Chair.
Order Business 9, introduction, first reading, and reference of bills.
Senate Bill 58, introduced by the Committee on Finance, an act relating to the judiciary, revising provisions relating to the employees of the Judicial Department of the State Government and providing otherwise properly thereto. Senate Bill 467, introduced by the Senate Committee on Finance, an act making an appropriation to the Department of Taxation for the relocation of its Carson City office and providing otherwise properly thereto. Senate Bill 475, introduced by the Senate Committee on Finance, an act making appropriations to and authorizing the expenditure of money by the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation for the replacement of computer hardware and associated software and providing other measures properly thereto. Senate Bill 480, introduced by the Senate Committee on Finance, and act relating to the Division of Forestry of the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, requiring the legislative auditor to conduct an audit related to the forest fire suppression budget account, making an appropriation and providing other measures properly thereto. Senate Bill 495, introduced by the Senate Committee on Finance, an act making appropriations to and authorizing the expenditure of money by the Division of Child and Family Services of the Department of Health and Human Services for the replacement of computer hardware and associated software, equipment, and vehicles, and for deferred maintenance projects, and providing other matters properly thereto. Senate Bill 498, introduced by the Senate Committee on Finance, an act making appropriation to the Division of Museums and History of the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs for the replacement and purchase of computer hardware, software, and related services, office furniture, equipment, and vehicles, and for deferred maintenance projects, and providing other matters properly thereto.
Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all Senate bills listed on the Senate bills introduction list dated May 31st, 2023 be referred to the committees as indicated on that list.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll go next to Order of Business 11, second reading and amendment.
Assembly Bill 128, introduced by Assemblywoman Howdigy, an act making an appropriation to the Outdoor Education and Recreation Grant Program account for the cost of the program and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 843, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 843 to Assembly Bill 128.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 843 to Assembly Bill 128. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Assembly Bill 319, introduced by Assemblywoman Howdigy, an act making an appropriation to the Department of Education for the purpose of awarding grants of money to the Nevada School District to provide universal free breakfast and lunch for Nevada pupils and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 840, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 840 to Assembly Bill 319.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 840 to Assembly Bill 319. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Assembly Bill 482, introduced by the Committee on Ways and Means, an act making appropriation to the Enterprise Application Services Unit of the Division of Enterprise Information Technology Services of the Department of Administration for the replacement of an information technology service management provider and computer hardware and associated software and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people's state of that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 833, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 833 to Assembly Bill 482.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 833 to Assembly Bill 482. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Assembly Bill 506, introduced by the Committee on Ways and Means, an act making appropriations to the Division of Enterprise Information Technology Services of the Department of Administration for the replacement of an information technology investments tracking system and computer hardware and associated software, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people's state of that are represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 836, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 836 to Assembly Bill 506.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 836 to Assembly Bill 506. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Assembly Bill 515, introduced by the Committee on Ways and Means, and act relating to education, creating the Incentivize and Pathways to Teaching Grant Program in the Department of Education, providing for the award of grants to certain universities and colleges under the program, requiring certain universities and colleges receiving grants under the program to award tuition assistance and stipends to students who meet certain requirements, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people's state of that are represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file.
Senate Bill 145, introduced by Senators Lang et al., an act relating to employee misclassification, authorizing the Labor Commissioner to collect investigative costs, revising provisions relating to the communication between offices of certain state agencies of information relating to employee misclassification, revising the administrative penalties that may be imposed for certain conduct relating to employee misclassification, eliminating the task force on employee misclassification, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people's state of that are represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 6, end of Section 6, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file.
Senate Bill 195, introduced by Senators Nguyen et al., Assemblyman Yeager et al., an act relating to cannabis, revising provisions relating to disciplinary action taken by the Cannabis Compliance Board against the holder of a license or registration card issued by the board, requiring the board to adopt regulations governing the transfer of an ownership interest in a cannabis establishment, revising provisions governing the fees the board is authorized to charge, requiring the board to adopt regulations governing the charging and collecting of certain fees and providing the measures properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 13, end of Section 13, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file.
Senate Bill 222, introduced by Senators Harris et al., an act relating to juries, revising provisions governing the selection of jurors, increasing the fee to which a person summoned to attend as a juror to serve or serve as a juror is entitled, making an appropriation to the Administrative Office of the Courts for the establishment of a connection to the information technology systems of the Department of Health and Human Services for certain purposes, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 8, end of Section 8, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file.
Senate Bill 232, introduced by Senators Canizaro et al., Assemblywoman Gorlow, an act relating to Medicaid, requiring the state plan for Medicaid to include coverage for postpartum care services for a certain period of time following a pregnancy, making appropriations to certain divisions of the Department of Health and Human Services, authorizing expenditures by certain divisions of the department, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file.
Senate Bill 237, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services, an act relating to behavioral health, revising provisions governing the imposition of a surcharge on certain communication services to support a suicide prevention and behavioral health crisis hotline, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file.
Senate Bill 275, introduced by Senators Daley and Orangehall, an act relating to manufactured home parks, requiring the Housing Division of the Department of Business and Industry to calculate annually and publish a maximum annual rent increase percentage in manufactured home parks, authorizing certain persons to apply for an exemption to certain requirements related to increases in rent, revising certain requirements related to increases in rent for certain tenancies in manufactured home parks, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file.
Senate Bill 290, introduced by Senators Canizaro and Lang, an act relating to financial services, requiring a person who provides earned wage access services to obtain a license from the Commissioner of Financial Institutions, imposing certain requirements on such licensees, authorizing the Commissioner in furtherance of his or her duties with respect to the issuance and renewal of certain licenses to participate in the nationwide multi-state licensing system and registry, authorizing the Commissioner to take certain actions relating to participation in the registry, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 37, end of Section 37, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file.
Senate Bill 305, introduced by Senators Harris et al., an act relating to employment, creating the Board of Trustees of the Nevada Employee Savings Trust, prescribing the membership powers and duties and limitations of the board, authorizing the board to create the Nevada Employee Savings Trust program, prescribing certain required attributes of the program, creating the Nevada Employee Savings Trust administrative fund, and specifying the sources and uses of money deposited therein, creating the Nevada Employee Savings Trust, and prescribing the manner of its administration, providing for the confidentiality of certain information, providing civil immunity to certain persons and entities in connection with the program, making certain persons fiduciaries with respect to participants in the program, prohibiting certain persons from engaging in certain financial transactions in connection with the program, requiring the preparation and submission of certain annual reports, making an appropriation to the Office of the State Treasurer for costs related to the administration of the program, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 38, end of Section 38, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 854, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, most hardworking speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 854 to SB 305.
Assemblywoman Torres has moved for the adoption of Amendment Number 854 to Senate Bill 305. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 307, introduced by Senator Spearman, an act relating to offenders, defining certain terms relating to the housing of offenders, requiring the Director of the Department of Corrections to adopt certain regulations relating to solitary confinement, prohibiting the department from placing an offender in solitary confinement under certain circumstances, providing that an offender is entitled to certain privileges while placed in solitary confinement, requiring the department to ensure that an offender placed in solitary confinement receives a daily health and wellness check, providing procedures for the removal of an offender from solitary confinement, requiring certain training for staff who work in units used for solitary confinement, requiring the department to submit a report concerning the use of solitary confinement to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on the Judiciary or the Legislature, limiting the number of days that an offender may be placed in disciplinary segregation, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 17, end of Section 17, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file. Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Order of Business 8, Mr. Speaker.
Order of Business 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all bills on general file be taken from their place on general file and be placed on the general file of the next legislative day.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. That will take us to Order Business 15, remarks from the floor. Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just one quick announcement. I would like to remind the body that tomorrow is Third House, so please join us here at 6 p.m. for Third House in the Assembly Chambers. Seeing no other business before us, Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly stand adjourned until Thursday, June 1st, 2023, at the hour of 11:30 a.m.
Assemblywoman Howdigy has moved that the Assembly stand adjourned until Thursday, June 1st, 2023, at the hour of 11:30 a.m. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Ways and Means Committee, you are adjourned.